All right, I'm sitting here at home on a Thursday morning. Let's try and do this homework for chapter 3. First, let me get my face off the picture. All right, so I'm in Blackboard. What am I? Week 2 is chapter 3 homework. I'm going to start this thing. And again, it's always better to do these homeworks when you have your textbook available, which I have my textbook right here. So let's go back and take a look at this thing. All right, question 1. A decrease in population will shift the demand curve to the left. And this is what's happening in Japan, actually. They are having their little problem with the population going down. And if you look at page 61 of the textbook, it talks about how these things where change in demand will happen. And they're talking about here's looking at a increase in demand. So if the population goes up, demand increases or shifts to the right. So for our case purposes, a decrease in population will shift demand curve to the left, which is true. Number 1 down. Question 2. A good for which demand decreases when the income decreases is a what kind of good? You got these 4 different kinds. And if we take a look at the textbook again, this I believe is on page 64. So I'm going to skip over to page 64. And it talks about these inferior normal goods. Actually, I think the page before, page 63, talks about these different. Nope, it's page 64. Substitute inferior normal good. Again, a normal good is just if I get increase in pay, I would buy more of a normal good. An inferior good, if my pay goes up, I'm not going to buy as much inferior goods. I'll go to the normal stuff. And again, substitute complementary good. I think they're fairly easy to understand. So let me go back to my question here. A good for which demand decreases when income decreases, that is a normal good. On this one, we'll take a look at some of the other ones, I think, later in the questions. A government sometimes can create excess supply. This is where government gets involved in supply and demand. And a lot of conservative economists do not like this because it leads to inefficiencies. But if they can create excess supply of a product by setting a minimum price for what the product may be sold to the customers. And this is called a price floor. Um, you know, a maximum price would be a price ceiling. But we're going to talk about this more later in the semester when we talk about how government gets involved and messes up or helps a market-based economy. So question 4, an increase in demand will cause the equilibrium price and quantity to rise. And yeah, that is true. That's on page, what page is that on? Easily shows this, I think, on page 62. Let's go back. Let's go down. Yeah, so here's where demand 1 goes to demand 2. So again, it goes from point A to point B, but here there's, again, to cause equilibrium, you got to go where supply and demand meets at point C. So here there's an increase in price and an increase in quantity when demand shifts to the right and equilibrium is restored. So let me go back. True, that is. So again, it's easy when you get these kind of questions to just draw the graph. Question number 5, an increase in supply of a product results when, and again, this is back in the textbook, what page? This is page 64 also, I believe. But this is what we talked about the other day in class, right? A tax on a product, if you tax it, it's going to actually cause a decrease in supply. Shift to the left. Companies produce have higher material costs. Same thing, shifts to the left. You know, it's the technology innovations like I was talking about with fracking the other day, the question on last year's midterm. That will increase the supply of a product. All right, question 6. Assume that coffee and tea are substitutes, right? I could do one or the other, depending on which is my mood or if there's a change in the world. So here, when the price of coffee increases, because tea is a substitute, the demand for tea will increase. Moving on, question 7. So here, this one's looking at 2 different people's demand curves. What page is this on in the textbook? I think it's on page 52. Let me go back to my textbook. takes me a while to get to 52. Be patient. Yeah, here, talking about Al's demand, B's demand. Again, to get the market demand, if these are the only two people in the market, you have to combine both. And that's what this question is looking at. You know, how demand is actually created by looking at a whole bunch of people's inputs to get the demand for the whole industry. So if I go back to this test, again, I got Molly's and Ryan's demand, so let me read the question. So Molly and Ryan's demand for individual demand curves for compact discs per month is obviously an old question. Assume Molly and Ryan are the only consumers in the market. What is the market quantity demanded at the price of $3? So basically, we're going to see what Molly wants, how many she wants at $3. So $3 for Molly is going to be what? Point G over here, that's 12 she'll demand. Ryan at $3, we're going to go over to his demand curve. He gets 8, right? 8 plus 12 is 20. I think that's fairly easy, but we'll see. Question 8. Here's a supply and demand of t-shirts. And here we're going to talk about some imbalances. And this is looking at page 59. This is one thing I didn't really talk about in class the other day. So here, this is if, again, we have different prices. If the price is at $6 here for pizza, there's going to be excess demand because it's such a low price, and where suppliers want to supply to. So same thing, if it's $12, there's an excess supply of pizzas. It's going to get so much, it's cost so much at $12, not many people want to buy it. So if there are these price imbalances, eventually it'll go to the equilibrium point. So this question here in Blackboard, let me go back to it. Taking a look at these t-shirts, right? So what are these? The price of t-shirts is $15. Again, if I look at $15 here, boom, this is going to have an imbalance, right? Because not many people are going to be buying it, and the suppliers would love to supply this thing. So there's going to be an excess supply. So if I look at, again, at where demand curve hits for $15, that's 2, right? T-shirts demanded. But the supply is 10. That would mean there's an excess supply of 8 t-shirts, right? And again, if there's excess supply, no one's selling their t-shirts, again, I got the extra $8, I would tend to basically cut the prices to sell my t-shirts. And it would eventually go back to this point A where $10 a t-shirt. But kind of talking about how these supply and demand works. Question 9, again, this is a good one, illustrates the demand for tacos, right? So here, a successful advertising campaign to sell tacos would bring about movement. So basically, it was a successful command, so demand shifted to the right, right? It went up. So it's either DO to D1 or D1 to D2 or some other choices. So it's not point A to point B. It's a whole shift in the demand curve. And it's not from 2 to 1, right? D2 to D1, that would be a decrease. It's got to be D0 to D1, right? This is basically a increase in demand. Something good happens, so it's a shift to the right. I'm moving on. Here we're working at supply. So this is looking at the supply of tacos. A decrease in the supply of tacos is represented by the movement from, again, this is a decrease in the whole supply. So it's got to be shifting to the left. So yeah, it's not A to B or C to B. It's what? S2 to S1, right? This is something bad happens. So it's shifting into the left. It's a decrease in supply. Moving on here. These are good questions because will help you with that. Again, look in the midterm question on supply and demand. So here, this is the next one here. A technological advance, right, which makes tacos cheaper to produce. And again, this is just like the fracking question the other day. So it's got to be moving the supply line to the right. So it's, which one is moving it to the right? It's got to be SO to S2, right? Because S2 to SO moves it to the left. I want to move it to the right. Question 12. In the event of excess supply in the coffee market, if there's, again, too much being produced, and again, there's excess supply, there's coffee left on the shelf, again, suppliers will basically cut the price of coffee. Fine, kind of common sense here. Sometimes reading all these different parts will confuse you sometimes, but the law of supply states there's a positive relation between price and quantity supplied. Ceteris paribus, again, all thing else being equal. And again, supply, remember the supply curves shifts to the, goes upward, right? So yes, that is a positive relation between the two. True. The market demand curve shows, again, this is actually right from the textbook. What page is this on? Let me get this written down. I think it's page 52, because it talks about these things. And again, when you take these tests, just, I'll give you a couple times, just to go through the textbook, and yeah, it's on page 52. It explains this, the market demand. It does show the relationship between the price of a good and the quantities that all consumers together are willing to buy. This is A. Question 15 is basically the same thing. I don't know why I'm repeating myself. So the demand curve shows the relation between the price and the quantity of all consumers and everything else being equal. Yeah, it's true. Kind of a waste of a question. All right, question 16. Ooh, this looks tricky. I don't think it really is, though. But figure 3.5 illustrates the set of supply and demand curves for hamburgers. Aha. An increase in supply. So again, an increase in supply is the whole supply curve shifting, right? And here it's increasing, so it's going to shift to the right. And an increase in the quantity demanded, again, when you see the word quantity in front of demanded, there's this movement along the demand curve. So if supply's got to shift from S1 to S2, right, it's either from A to B or D to C, right? Because it's just the demand curve is not changing here because we see the quantity demanded. So which one is right? I got, what did I say, A, B, or DC? So it's A, B, right? This first one. Again, just the supply curve shifts to the right. And there's just a change in quantity demanded from A to B here. Da, 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 da. Question 17, last one, same sort of thing. Supply and demand for hamburgers, yeah. A decrease in demand. So demand is shifting, something bad's happening, going to the left, right? A decrease in demand and a decrease in the quantity supplied. Again, so just it's going from D1 to D2, so it's either B to C or A to D. So here I got B to C. So hopefully this makes sense. But again, this is a key chapter in the course. There will be a bunch of questions on the midterm on this one. So I'm going to save and submit all my questions. Yeah. So, and follow this thing along. Any questions, you can always email me.